Hello everyone and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Vorse, reminding you to sign up for our daily Church Militant newsletter so you don't end up getting truthful information blocked by liberal social media giants. It's pretty clear right now that a good number of cardinals and archbishops in the United States hierarchy are more than a little shell-shocked from the fallout of the Uncle Ted McCarrick explosion. Just 2 weeks ago, the liberal plan to continue deconstructing the Catholic Church in America, by them, was humming along just fine. And then all of a sudden, boom, the fallout from what are now hundreds of articles and stories exploding on an almost daily basis, not to mention the outrage being expressed by zillions of Catholics on social media, has finally brought the spotlight on the nefarious schemes of this notorious bunch. People are starting to connect dots that just 2 weeks ago they didn't even know existed. One of those dots is just how rampant homosexuality is in the priesthood, and not just confined to priests like they would have you believe, the bishops, but bishops and cardinals, and how other cardinals and bishops have covered all of this up for decades. The lies, hypocrisy, blackmail, the filth, the abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, abuse of sacred authority by sick and twisted men, it's almost unbelievable. What's being totally exposed is what we could simply term the network. And once you see things through this prism, you wonder how you didn't see it all along. You know, like those pictures, those dots, and they say, look, keep looking in the picture and you'll see another picture. And once you see, you're like, wow, how did I ever miss that? The network is a of on various levels of pro-homo-communist-minded clerics, all swimming in the same cesspool. There may be some in that cesspool who are there somewhat naively, but given recent revelations, not many. When Joseph Stalin gave orders in the 1920s for Catholic seminaries to be infiltrated by young communist agents with his words, neither faith nor morals, it was homosexuals who did the infiltrating. This intelligence was passed along by Communist Party USA member Bella Dodd, selected to do the actual recruiting and placement of these homo-communist infiltrators. Dodd came clean on her part in the plot once she converted to Catholicism in the 1950s under Bishop Sheen. Once these agents worked their way into the system, and some of them advanced, they slowly began introducing little notions here and there meant to sow doubt in the minds of Catholics about church teaching. This was told to Church Militant by Dr. Alice von Hildebrand, who along with her husband Dietrich von Hildebrand became very good friends with Dodd, who told them all about the seminary plot. Little by little, these men became ordained and moved up the ladder, introducing various heretical ideas under the guise of new philosophies or theological approaches, but many of them were also practicing homosexuals who, once they reached a certain level, began recruiting other homosexuals into the seminaries as well. And not only were other homosexuals recruited, but good men were blocked from getting in or eventually getting ordained. A decided shift in how the church approached poverty, for example, was one of those ideas introduced. In centuries gone by, religious orders were jammed to the rafters with people who wanted to give their life's work to helping the poor or teaching them or all of that kind of work, the corporal works of mercy. But suddenly, in the 1960s, at the same time the church's teaching was being replaced with revolutionary theological notions, a massive push in the area of so-called social justice exploded onto the scene, with many of the same professed goals as Marxist communism. Today, the so-called Catholic social justice movement is barely distinguishable, at least in principle, from the Communist Manifesto. Saul Alinsky found willing allies in some influential members of the Chicago Catholic clergy beginning after World War II, right about the same time the original homo-commie agents would have started coming into their own in positions of authority in the church. So for the next roughly 20 years, these men increased in stature and influence, as well as planned for and recruited the next generation of young seminarians, many of them homosexual, who would take over once they had died. So the timeline plays out like this, roughly. For about 20 years, the 1920s and 30s, 1,100 homo-communist agents infiltrate the U.S. Catholic seminaries. The 1940s and 50s, some number of them, at varying rates, because this happened over the course of 20 years, gain strong footholds and positions of influence at various levels of leadership and begin affecting change in theological arenas as well as new approaches to the church's social teachings. In the 1960s and 70s, as they were in their 60s and 70s in their age, they ensured that the new crop of seminarians is very much like them, homosexual and social activists with an emphasis on socialism. This new group, not necessarily communist agents themselves like the original group, is nonetheless imbued with these socialist ideas as well as homosexual, or at least willing to turn a blind eye to it among their brothers. They are poorly formed in the faith, embracing of so-called social justice and homosexualist in their outlook. That last sentence describes almost perfectly the situation in the American hierarchy as a collective body today. Even Pope Benedict said that many of today's bishops are poorly formed in the faith, and the laity was going to have to suffer through this. We are. So look at what we have today, a hierarchy embracing almost all of the entire socialist political agenda, embracing practically anything gay, and working feverishly to destroy or supplant tradition at every turn. They work in concert with each other, even appearing in the same talk show formats, to smilingly sit there, look all sweet and funny and kind and approachable, while they're spreading their propaganda with the assistance of other men, just as committed to the homosexual communist agenda as they are. And the aim of that agenda is to destroy the church from within. And being honest, they've done a mighty fine job. What they did not count on was the ability of the laity, the faithful laity, through technology to expose them and their evil. This has been going on for decades. Active homosexual bishops and cardinals who are predators. But they were able to pretty much keep the lid on all of this because the technology was not in place to bring it all into focus at the same time. Same with the social justice aspect of the network, the homosexual collective network. They could work their plans in relative silence because of how far-flung they were and difficult to connect for the average layman. So in every area of church life, liturgy, devotions, religious orders, universities, theological training, art and architecture, it doesn't matter, you name it, the network has almost completely wiped out anything Catholic and replaced it with a substitute. The effeminacy of a huge number of priests today has been widely commented on. The horrible catechesis, the false ecumenism, the billions and billions in government handouts, all of it has completely reshaped the church, right in accord with Solon's original plan a little less than 100 years ago. The aim of the plan was to first remove the church as an obstacle to world domination by socialists, meaning communists, and second, to co-opt its institutions and personnel to help bring the revolution about. But their evil has caught up with them. They are being exposed as depraved homosexuals hiding in robes with no faith and no morals, who hate the church, her morality, and her natural law clarity. Alma McCarrick fits the bill completely, a man with no faith and no morals, deeply involved in the socialist Catholic Relief Services business, pushed nonstop, mind you, by the nation's bishops. He's not alone among senior members of the U.S. hierarchy. He just got caught and exposed. All of this is nothing less than a homosexual, communist, clerical cesspool. And if there was ever a swamp in need of draining, this is it. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.